So in today's weekly Jinx video, and for those that don't know, every Wednesday we do a Jinx video, whether it's about the lore, the meta, how she's doing in the meta, or anything to do with Jinx, and it's decided by you commenting in the comment section below of what you want to see me talk about for next week's video. We actually had several requests for this week's video, including how to play Jinx in other lanes, let's say the scenario where you have to play her in another lane, and one of the ones I'm going to do for today's video is actually Deft's Jinx game when he played NKT versus Samsung over in Korea. And the reason I'm doing that game is just because that one is only going to be relevant for a certain amount of time, but those other ones I will be doing in next week's video most likely. So I haven't forgot about you guys, but that's why I'm doing this week's video. And pretty much the request was just asking to break down what Deft was doing, why he built what he did, and kind of why he's just probably the best Jinx player on the planet. Now first I'm actually going to start with the team composition. He had a Kennen, a Lee Sin, a Malzahar, and a Karma, which was much better than the Jinx game that Goldcorn United played, where they had not a single bit of peel, and when Jinx would get jumped by Camille, Zyra, who would be standing right next to her, wouldn't even try and peel for her. It would just be, let's go dive the enemy bot lane, see if we can kill their carry before ours dies. With that said, in this particular game, they had a much better team comp for a Jinx to succeed. You had the Karma in lane, and on top of that you had the Kennen, which Papa Smithy noted in this video, something I also kind of agree with, and it's that when you have a Kennen paired with a hyper carry like a Jinx or a Kog'Maw, he occupies a lot of space, he occupies a lot of AoE, and he allows you to play a janitor job if you can't necessarily hit the front line from the front line yourself. Part of what makes Deft so good on Jinx, in my opinion, is how also aggressive he plays the champion. The champion's not really a duelist like a Lucian or a Vayne, but in the lane phase he even pops heal early just to have some extra time to trade with the Kalista, to try and stay with the Kalista in CS and stay with the Kalista in damage. Now of course, because this is more of a professional scenario and a coordinated team, that means when they pick a Jinx they know, hey, we need to put as many resources as we can on the Jinx, unlike solo queue or something where, hey, you pick Jinx, but if you try to come mid lane after taking bot tower, you'll get aggressively pinged to leave the lane instead of what you should be doing, which is trying to push down mid tower, push down top tower. That's what you do, you're a tower pusher. So I think some of those factors also play into why he's so good on this champion that we necessarily can't replicate in solo queue. But I don't think those are the only reasons. I think it's some of those things like orb walking. I think orb walking is probably the biggest reason why he's so good on Jinx. It's because, and for those that don't know what orb walking is, but maybe they've heard the term before, it's pretty much when you're kiting and you attack between moving. So like if you were running away from somebody, but also attacking while you ran and just moving back and forth. And orb walking and kiting in general is very auto attack and attack speed reliant. Jinx has built-in attack speed on her minigun, on top of the fact that she builds attack speed usually over the course of a game, and Deft never misses really an auto between when he's orb walking and kiting something, so he makes the most out of the minigun's attack speed, he makes the most out of Jinx's overall DPS, he makes the most out of his item builds, and there was a Baron fight where he could have easily gotten killed by Kalista, and they ended up turning it around because he got in the extra autos, killed Kalista, ended up picking up a triple kill, and even though the enemy team got Baron, about almost 4 of them died, so the Baron wasn't very useful. Furthermore, I'm going to finish this video by talking about the build a bit, because he rushed, and I say rush with air quotations because it's becoming more of a norm on Jinx and just everybody, to build Blade of the Ruined King as a first item. And now, we've talked about this on the Jinx subreddit, for example, of how we feel Blade of the Ruined King is. The general consensus was, with its current iteration, it actually is a decent item on Jinx, as a replacement to Bloodthirster even, but it wasn't really necessarily a great first item on Jinx. But apparently in the professional scene they disagree, because this has been about 3 games professionally of Jinx played, and in all 3 Blade of the Ruined King was built first. I've seen Caitlyn games where Blade of the Ruined King was built first. Varus and Ashe, who you thought maybe had fallen off because there's no more lethality and utility needed, they're building Blade of the Ruined King first now too. I guess that item is so good right now, it's just what you build first. But let's briefly talk about it real quick on Jinx, and the fact that it does give you attack speed, it does give you lifesteal, and it does give you a way to kill a tank before they're super beefy, but if they've already got maybe an item or 2 going. And the Nautilus in this game on the enemy team was rushing Ninja Tabi and Frozen Mallet to deal with Deft's Jinx, which was also part of his success, because then it met things like the Malzahar and the Kennen, who built Ritz in and was more on attack damage, could more easily kill Nautilus. There was really nothing the Nautilus could do to survive with all the different kinds of damage on the enemy team, let's put it that way. And even if Deft couldn't really get in there and do massive damage that way, he could play janitor and clean up if he needed to, which you saw kind of in the game. I think part of it, again, is how aggressively Deft actually plays a champion. A lot of people see champions like Jinx, Caitlyn, the long-range backline, quote-unquote, AD carries, and they're under the impression that they must stay in the backline at all times to auto-attack. When, in my opinion, if you really want to make use of that attack range, you want to frontline, when I say frontline safely, you want to frontline to the point where you won't die. You're not in the front line getting bursted immediately by the enemy mage, but your team is reliable enough that you can frontline and they will keep you safe so you can actually abuse the range that those kind of champions have. And I think that's kind of what you saw a little bit in this game as well. Deft was able to go forward, so he had the Karma to protect him. He had the Malzahar who could also dish out a lot of damage, but also had an ultimate that could lock down a target in case they got too close. And you saw, in my opinion, a lot of that was the reason why he was so successful in this particular game, where he ends up going deathless, as a matter of fact. So when you combine all those factors, I think that ultimately is why Deft is probably the best Jinx player in the world, and why this game was so successful for him. Even in the laning phase, like even though he wasn't necessarily couldn't out duel Kalista, he was playing Jinx in a way that you would think that there was someone on even terms in terms of what they can do with dueling. Now, yes, I'm not saying it's impossible for a Jinx to beat a Kalista lane. I'm just saying in terms of dueling, like Kalista's gonna spike off of just the Blade of the Ruined King and the Runon's Hurricane, while Jinx, she can do work with those items, but she's probably not going to be as powerful until she at least gets either triple crit or an extra damage item or something else, which by the time this game ended, you actually saw Jinx forgo Infinity Edge. She went Runons and Phantom Dancer, and Deft then built a QSS, Blade of the Ruined King, and then attack speed boots, and then Mortal Reminder, so that he could also kill the tank Nautilus without the Blade of the Ruined King or with it, and then also have the Last Whisper, which is another topic for another time. I think both those items combined, the Last Whisper item and Blade, is a really efficient way to take on tanks, whether it's one tank or multiple tanks. I think that was actually really clever on his part. But beyond that, that's something I kind of want to somewhat end the video on, is that we're seeing Blade of the Ruined King be super powerful on a lot of champions that we necessarily didn't expect it to be powerful on, to the point we're seeing some of them forego Infinity Edge, like Jinx. Jinx done Infinity Edge, but she still had a lot of crit because she had 2 Zeal items. She had the attack speed and lifesteal of the Blade of the Ruined King, she had the lifesteal of the QSS, which builds in Mercurial Scimitar even, and then had the Last Whisper to also deal with Nautilus just in case the Blade wasn't quite enough. My question that I'm going to propose to you is, I'll put a link to this game in the description down below so you can just go watch it yourself. It's about a 47-minute game between picks and bans, and the end of the game, Deft ended up getting the MVP. Sorry. But is it at the point right now where Blade of the Ruined King is that powerful that you should like forego Infinity Edge on Jinx? Like you should rush Blade of the Ruined King and then do something of a standard build, because that item is so powerful that it's probably going to get nerfed. So what I'm basically saying is, the item free right now? Is it like free low, and this is an item that just should be built right now no matter what, because it's going to get nerfed, but right now it's so powerful it'll make any AD carry seem good or relevant because of all the things it brings to the table. When one of the things Papa Smithy mentioned in this video that I also want to mention, or in the game that I also want to mention in this video, is that Blade of the Ruined King is so popular right now because it can give all these carries that had item issues a 1 item power spike. And one of the things we've talked about in the subreddit even was that Jinx doesn't necessarily need buffs. She's actually pretty good, but if there was a problem with her, it's actually her item build and just how long it takes to scale into the game, and a meta where games aren't necessarily lasting 40+ minutes all the time. They do sometimes, and when that happens, you look really powerful because you're getting your items, you're scaling, you have gold, and you can kill things. If that doesn't happen, then you're kind of in a situation where it's like, well, I don't really have an early game item that I could switch to building instead. If you're one of those people that don't build autopilot and just build the same thing every game no matter how the game's going, if you're someone that kind of addresses how the game's going and you're like, hey, I'm gonna need this item pretty quickly, I need to even start building it now, so by the time they get like their 3rd tank item, I have the Last Whisper item completely done, I have Lord Dominic's Regards even. If you're one of those kind of people that adapt your build per game, that was kind of a problem when a game was out of control, sub like 20-15 minutes. Late game carries didn't really have an item they could go to and build to do anything about that, but they kind of do now with Blade of the Ruined King. So I keep putting this idea in because I kind of want to also get people's opinion on Blade of the Ruined King, because like I said, the subreddit was kind of divided that it's a good item, it's a good first item, it's a good lifesteal item, or it's not actually a good item at all on Jinx. And even Deft is building it on Jinx. You know, in the Gold Coin United game, it was first built on Jinx. Professional, people are building it first on Jinx. Does that mean the rest of us should be building it too? Do they know something we don't? Or is it just that pro play is so coordinated they can get away with things that we can't get away with? Now that's all for this video. I didn't want to make it this long of a video, but it was actually a lot to go over and a lot of ideas I wanted to make sure I got across this time so the video wasn't too short, and so that way any questions you might have might possibly be answered by me rambling on a bit longer than I usually do in these videos. So thank you so much for watching this video if you did. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, specifically comment, so that way if you have a request for next week's video, or actually I say the week afterwards since we have the topic for next week's video, you can comment in the comment section down below of what you want to see me talk about. But that's all for this video. I don't know which video will be next because life can be quite a mess. So until next time, take care from the Fire Guy FS. Thank you for watching.
The sinking feeling, KT had to go and make their fans optimistic again. The KT fans are going to be shouting at the top of their lungs because if they get this KT in the final, they believe that they can beat SKT and take that crown.
I'm beginning to believe as well. I mean, Morpheus said it right the first time. Beginning to believe is certainly what we all should be thinking because Deft now picking up so many MVP points so far these playoffs. Oh my goodness, and the Jinx was such a treat to watch.
Isn't it nice when the mechanics line up with the picks, line up with the macro? You could number the mistakes made from KT that were catastrophic on one hand. Deft flashing in for the crit in top lane.
Yep.
Some of the other overextensions on the inner turret in games 1 and 2. In this game, not too many mistakes, honestly, from the side of KT Rolster. Usually it gets to multiple digits in a single game, but that wasn't today. The narratives that we were following were abandoned, and KT Rolster largely came through very convincing. They beat MVP 3-0. Everyone said, well, it was about what we expected. Maybe the flattered by the scoreline was KT Rolster. It didn't feel like a 3-0. This felt like a 3-0. They 3-0'd at the time the best performing team in Korea. And while SKT can talk about the fact that they'd already locked in finals for a while, you now never really know who's going to come out ahead on the 22nd in Incheon.
And it's not Samsung making catastrophic mistakes or anything like that. This Baron was actually a decent call with 3 dead, including the jungler. But it was KT playing ludicrously. Deft, all of this attack speed at this particular point.
His juggling of the rocket launcher and the machine gun. If he had changed the machine gun a second later, wouldn't have had 3 stacks, wouldn't have had enough attack speed to actually pick up the kill on the Kalista. And from there, target selection is perfect. QV had to balance resists, so doesn't have enough of either. Is never a front line to allow the Kalista to pick up the kills from the back line, and then everyone's food for KT Rolster.
Yeah, and the target selection from KT as well, absolutely stunning. They knew that they were getting rid of QV on the top side of the map. Then immediately, Crown, a little bit overextended, all the CC on him, and they get 2 picks, and then there's no way for Stitch to jump around in the back.
And it's even more technical than that. They know they can never get to Stitch, so they kill everyone in front of Stitch so he has no front line to do any damage.
And then once again, I mean, QV run on a merry ride around Summoner's Rift. All about the Jinx, but